smoke rose from the distant forest, drifting slowly through the cold morning air. The figures stopped at the same time, as if they had all received the same invisible signal. No one spoke. No one needed to. Between them, there were no words left, no agreements, no shared understanding. Only watchful eyes and hands tightening around whatever they were holding. Food had been running out for days. The fire in front of them was dying, and the silence had grown heavier than any sound that had ever existed. The distance between the two groups was not great, but it was enough to decide who would live and who might disappear. With no more prey to hunt, no path left to retreat, humanity was forced to face itself. A single step forward, then hesitation. Breathing grew sharper, eyes no longer looked away. And in that moment, a decision was made, without words, without confirmation. From this point on, the old world ended, because humans were no longer hunting animals to survive. For the first time in history, they began hunting their own kind in order to live. After that first moment, no one stood still anymore. What had just happened shattered the final bond that once held them together. Before this, they had survived through sharing. They had gathered around the same fire, passed along the last scraps of meat after failed hunts, and believed, quietly, that cooperation would be enough. But that fragile balance began to crack as food grew scarcer and empty-handed hunting trips became more frequent. Children grew thinner. The elderly could no longer travel far. And each morning, the first thing people saw was no longer hope, but the silent question of who would eat that day. At first, they tried to preserve the old order. They divided what little remained. They told themselves tomorrow would be better. But hunger does not care about belief, and time does not wait for anyone. As night fell, conversations faded away. In their place came stolen glances, hands hidden behind backs, and suspicion spreading like an unnamed disease. Everyone understood the truth. If one person grew weaker, another would grow stronger. If one hesitated, someone else would move first. No rule was strong enough to protect everyone. Rules are born from abundance, and here there was only scarcity. Small groups began to separate, not out of hatred, but out of instinct, the need to secure survival for themselves. And as the distance between them grew, trust vanished with it. Moonless nights stretched longer. Even the smallest sound was enough to make people flinch. And in that darkness, humanity began to realize something terrifying. The greatest threat no longer came from wild animals or a hostile environment. It came from those who once sat beside them at the fire. From that moment on, every step was taken with caution. Every decision carried greater weight, because everyone knew the old world was gone. And to keep living, they would soon be forced to face even harsher choices ahead. After nights filled with suspicion, tension finally spilled into action. What once passed for order shattered like fragile pottery beneath a careless step. At first, movements were tentative, quiet tests of the unknown. Then a scream was swallowed by the air, someone ran, a shadow fell, and everything changed in the rhythm of human breath. Old norms faded away, not through any declaration, but through small, deliberate acts. A basket of food hidden from sight, a curt remark, a cold stare that no longer promised return. They learned to see one another as potential threats, and every glance became a calculation of life and death. Small groups split off to guard their meager supplies. Makeshift barriers were raised. Ears listened more than mouths spoke. In the darkness, fire became rare because it drew not only hope, but danger. When someone was lost, there was no grand mourning. only a quiet absence among those who remained, a subtle rearrangement of positions within the group. Survival now depended on immediate decisions, not on kindness. One group chose to act first. They moved at night with crude tools, driven by hunger rather than hatred. Their actions needed no explanation. Each step cut through the illusion of safety, while the wind through the trees concealed their movement like a thin veil. Not every action ended in death. Often it was smaller losses, a missing bag of food, a broken container. But the consequence was the same. Trust continued to shrink, and the human spirit grew thinner. Some became ruthless through silence, watching the weak and waiting for the right moment. Others showed their aggression openly, pressuring, threatening, taking by force. New methods of survival were forged in an instant. Mothers held their children close. The elderly hid in the shadows. They watched. They learned. They adapted their strategies to stay alive. Every small action was remembered. Every reaction became a lesson. Within a few nights, the original order of the community collapsed. Old alliances dissolved. Familiar faces turned unfamiliar. And some discovered within themselves an instinct they had never known, a cold resolve to claim their share. There were no heroes. No one was entirely evil. Only people pushed to the edge, choosing the path they believed might carry them into tomorrow. When the sun rose, the landscape told the story. Fresh footprints, objects shifted from their places, traces of late-night encounters. Fear hung in every gaze like a heavy mist. All plans became short-term, every promise fragile. Uncertainty became inseparable from daily life. From this point on, every decision had to be made instantly. Every act of sharing demanded a price. And those still standing had to learn to anticipate, to conceal, and, when necessary, to be ruthless. In that moment, the old world died once again. A new one took shape, defined by unspoken rules, reckless calculations of interest, and a fear that never truly left. The Yi survivors looked around, knowing there was no way back. And in their eyes lived a cold determination, an acceptance that survival was no longer a collective endeavor, but a solitary struggle, reserved for those strong enough or lucky enough to hold on to what was theirs. After the old order collapsed, humanity no longer had to learn how to fight. It had to learn how to choose, because each passing day forced people to face decisions with no correct answer. Keeping food for oneself meant pushing someone else closer to starvation. Sharing it meant placing oneself in danger. That quiet struggle unfolded in every glance, every measured breath, every slowed step taken through the night. No one believed in long-term promises anymore. Tomorrow was never guaranteed, and life now stretched forward only moment by moment. Some chose to leave the community behind, disappearing deeper into the forest in the hope that something, anything, remained untouched. Others stayed, drawing invisible boundaries around what little they possessed, treating anyone who came too close as a threat. Mothers calculated every portion more carefully than ever before, not out of greed, but because each decision was tied to the lives of their children. In that silence, love slowly took the shape of hardness. The elderly grew quieter. They understood they stood at the end of the line, and that acceptance weighed heavier than any fear they had known before. At times, people longed to return to the moment before everything changed. But memory cannot feed anyone, and the past only made the present more painful. Small choices accumulated into profound change. One person chose not to speak. Another chose to walk away. Someone else chose to act first. so as not to be the one left behind. Gradually, empathy gave way to calculation. Every action carried a single question. Would it help one survive one more day? In the darkness, exchanges took place without words. Eyes replaced promises. Agreements formed on the shared foundation of fear. No one wanted to become cruel. Yet circumstance turned softness into a liability, and people began to redefine right and wrong in whatever way best served their survival. Old relationships were tested to their limits. Some were willing to leave in order to protect family. Others turned their backs on former friends to secure a chance to endure. And within those choices, there was no celebration, only a lingering weight. When night fell, those who remained looked around, not for comfort, but to determine who might still be there come morning. Because in this new world, survival was no longer a collective story. It had become a personal equation, one each individual was forced to solve, at the cost of themselves. When everything finally settled, when there were no more hurried footsteps and no more wary glances cutting through the air, the survivors stood still within a world that had changed, without needing anyone to tell them that a boundary had just been crossed. The trees were still there, the sky remained above them, but something essential had vanished, never to be recovered. From the moment humanity chose its own kind as an opponent, the last trace of innocence disappeared with it. There was no celebration for those who endured, only a prolonged silence and a hollow feeling without a name, because the price of continuing to exist was carrying the memory of what had been lost. The eyes that remained did not search for forgiveness, nor did they wait for explanations. They looked forward with a cold acceptance that the path back had been erased. From here on, every step humanity would take carried the imprint of that first choice, a choice that opened the long history of conflict, of fear, and of survival at any cost. And no matter how much time passes, this moment remains like a deep scar, reminding us that the journey of humankind turned onto a different path, beginning on the day humans first chose to destroy one another in order to keep living. If these stories matter to you, if you wish to continue exploring the moments when human nature is laid bare, you are welcome to stay with us. This is the final march.